Hey, everybody. Welcome to our session here on Power BI Fundamentals. This is part of our Open Campus Week. We're really excited to have you here with our Power BI instructor, Aaron Parry. Aaron is going to walk you through some of the basics of Power BI. But before we have him do that, I want to talk a little bit about Open Campus and make sure you guys know what to expect here, what's coming up. We've got a lot of fun stuff here for you. So this is part of our first ever week where we are making the entire course library available for free. You can get a lot more information at mavenanalytics.io/open-campus. You can go there and you can register for your free account. It does not require putting in a credit card or anything like that. Just go answer a couple questions, your name, your email, and you should be able to get right in there. And then you should be able to start taking courses immediately. We hope everybody will do that over the next week. Try to complete as many as you can. And then I want to also run through quickly what we've got. So today is all about data skills. We just had a session on Excel and SQL. Even if you missed that, you can go register. And how about now, Eline? Can you guys hear? Okay. Then right now we've got Aaron doing Power BI fundamentals. Then we'll get into Python with Chris Brule. And then the final session of the day might be Chris Dutton. He's a little under the weather, so might also be Enrique covering for him. Then tomorrow we're going to focus on data careers. We'll bring in two recently transitioned data analysts who have just got really, really good fresh perspectives on some advice that they'll give you about how to break in. Then we'll have Dustin Schimek, who's got an incredible data jobs report. He also does a lot of other stuff to aggregate jobs that are available. He's somebody who's fantastic. Anybody should be following him if you're thinking about getting into this as a career. Then we'll have Enrique again, helping you build an amazing project portfolio. And then finally, we'll close the day with possibly Chris, or maybe Aaron might jump back in. And we'll be talking about how you can rock your next data analyst interview. And then finally, on Friday, we'll have a data journeys focused day. Chris will talk about some of the different common analytics paths. We'll help you figure out which of them might be the best fit for you so you can kind of point yourself in the right direction. Then we'll talk with Kristen, who she started as an analyst. She got into data science and machine learning. She runs her own consulting practice right now. Super interesting person. She also runs a podcast. She's a speaker at a lot of live events. So she really has created her own destiny in data, and just really inspiring person to hear from. Then we'll have Alice Zhao. She has helped over 400 people create data science projects through her work as a university professor. She's also Maven's newest instructor. She's got a couple of Python courses that you should check out. And we'll close out the week with me giving you a step-by-step guide to launching your data career. We'll give you a great checklist that you can follow, and we'll go deep on some of the topics that we haven't covered so far this week. So that said, the only thing I just want to encourage everybody over the next week, try to get into the platform, use it as much as possible. We've never made all of our courses free before, and we're really excited about it. We hope you guys will go nuts and just learn as much as you can. And with that said, I'll turn it over to Mr. Parry, and he is going to teach you some of the fundamentals of Power BI. I'll be hanging out in the comments. Aaron, if there's anything you want me to link to, give me a shout, but show's yours.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, John. I'm just sharing my screen now, so hopefully everybody can see that. John, you got that?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. So yeah, super excited for this. Just to quickly introduce myself for anybody that hasn't already kind of taken our courses or, seen me on LinkedIn or anything. My name is Aaron Parry. I'm the Chief Customer Officer here at Maven Analytics. I'm also the lead Power BI instructor. Over the course of my career, I've done everything from marketing analytics to analytics consulting. I've helped teams and businesses implement full stack BI solutions. So got a pretty good depth of knowledge there when it comes to analytics and BI. I've gone through the Microsoft Certified Data Analyst exam, and again, created a bunch of courses for Maven. So super happy to be talking with everybody today, and very excited for the end for questions and seeing you all in the courses later. So the whole purpose of this kind of presentation here, or this session, is I want to walk you through at a very, very high level the different pieces and kind of functionality of Power BI. Kind of can really break it down into what we like to refer to as the analytics workflow, right? So it's everything from connecting to data initially all the way to delivering dashboards and insights to the end user. So we're going to walk through a few different slides here, kind of talking about each one of those components. And then we will wrap things up with a live demo where we'll connect to a couple of data sources, build out some transformations, create some measures, and then build out a couple of visualizations. So we'll dig right in. Loving the comments and everything within the chat here. So keep it coming and we'll try to get to stuff at the end. So Power BI. I'm sure folks have heard about it by now, unless you're living under a rock. It's a self-service business intelligence platform, and it includes a desktop and web-based application called Power BI Service. And it's really used for connecting to, modeling, and visualizing data from a bunch of disparate sources. And it has been the leader within the business intelligence category for a handful of years now. So it's really the kind of standout tool within this ecosystem. So I get it, that's great, but what can we actually do with Power BI, right? Why does it really matter? And Power BI is super powerful because it allows us to connect to and transform and load millions and millions of rows of data into Power BI. And we can take this data from anywhere. So databases, flat files, on-premise connectors, cloud-based services, folders, almost anywhere that data is stored, you can import it into Power BI and then use it for some sort of analysis. Once the data is in there, you can build relational data models, following some of those best practices. And again, what this is doing is giving you a holistic performance of a bunch of different disparate data sources, right? So you can pull data from a whole bunch of different places and build out a single model to look at insights and trends based on that. You can also define calculations using Power BI's built-in analysis language called DAX, or Data Analysis Expressions. And again, this allows you to basically access data and features within the different tables. So you can build out calculated columns or measures to aggregate your data. And really what we're doing here is bringing data to life, right? At the end of the day, it isn't necessarily about, connecting to data or, building those relationships or the calculations. It's really that end result, right? We want to build these impactful reports and dashboards that deliver strong insights and recommendations. And that's one of the strengths here with Power BI as well. And then last but not least, what this really helps you with is to build a versatile skill set, right? Like we had talked about, Power BI is an industry leader in self-service Power BI. And it really, it helps continue to build that skill set that's highly transferable across other tools, jobs, applications, that kind of stuff. So let's kind of talk about the Power BI workflow a little bit. There's really two sides to Power BI. Right, we've got we'll build out the rest of the slide here. So we've really got the back end, which is on the left hand of the slide. And this is where you are connecting to data and shaping data. And basically you're doing all of your data prep in the back end before you actually load it into the front end of Power BI to do things like data modeling, add calculations with DAX, or build out reports. So I like to think about Power BI in those kind of two separate areas, the front end and the back end. So what does this workflow actually look like? So starting from the query editor, we're loading data into the query editor or accessing it through the query editor. And we're performing a bunch of different data transformations. There is almost an infinite amount that you can do within the query editor in order to kind of transform and shape your data. So that's really the first step in the process here. After you get the data in a good spot, you want to load it into Power BI, and then you're going to create a data model. And this data model is really just the definition of relationships between your lookup tables and your fact tables, right? And we'll quickly cover that in one of the next slides here. But that's really the basic premise of these data models, is you've got these lookup tables and these fact tables, and these relationships are basically defining how filters are transferred between the two tables. After that, you have your table view, and this is a great place to do different types of kind of QA and analysis within the Power BI front end. It's also a really good spot to start adding in calculated columns with DAX if that's something that you need to do as part of your report. And then last, certainly not least, we've got the data view, we've got the report view here. And this is, again, our reporting canvas, right? We're going to be adding any sorts of visuals and cards, anything here that we want to actually build out and visualize for our end users. So from a very high level, that's really the Power BI workflow. I'll take a couple of minutes here and jump into kind of each of these specific items and just a little bit more detail. So we go into all of this in much more depth within the Power BI desktop course. But when you start off, you're in Power Query, right? We've kind of talked about this already. And Power Query, it's a collection or a set of data connectivity and preparation tools that allow you to extract, transform, and then load data from a bunch of different platforms and sources into a single cohesive environment, right? So if you've ever struggled in the past, trying to get multiple, tables from different sources, into Excel and visualizing that kind of stuff, this is one of those really, it's one of the strengths of Power BI here. So again, with the query editor, we can connect to data. And again, there's hundreds of pre-built connectors that you can connect to. You can profile and QA the data to help explore it, make sure that all of your data types and everything are accurate and correct, and then prepare it for modeling. You can transform and shape the tables to add new features, meaning new columns. You can modify values. You can group records, sort, filter. Again, there is a multitude of options that you can access to help transform and shape the data. You can merge and append queries together. So, coming from, like a SQL background or something, these are joins, right? You can join or append tables together. And then if you have ever used M code before, anything that isn't available as part of the UI tools, you could always write some custom M functions or code to help transform the data. But that isn't something that we actually cover within the Power BI desktop course. It's just good to be aware of if your skill set aligns with that. So let's quickly talk about the Power Query Editor and how we actually get to it. So when you initially launch Power BI Desktop, you're going to see this home menu at the top, and there's this Transform Data button. And this is basically the gateway into the back end of Power BI or into the Query Editor. And when you click Transform Data, the Query Editor window launches, and it's going to look like this. And there's a bunch of different components to the Query Editor window. So on the top, you've got these kind of familiar ribbon tools. These are the query editing tools to do things like adding columns, transforming columns. You can access your QA and data profiling tools from here. Underneath that, you've got your formula bar, and this is M code that is generated automatically for each one of the steps or the transformations that you apply to the data. Again, this can be customized, it could be added to, amended. There's really a lot of possibilities here once you get more comfortable within the tool. On the left-hand side, we have our queries pane. And this is a list of all of the queries or the connections that we have within the data model. So for example, you see we have our calendar table, a customer lookup, product category lookup. These are all individual tables that we've connected to. And once we connect to them, we see a preview in the middle of our space here that outlines, hey, these are all the columns, the data types, the values, all that kind of stuff. On the right-hand side, we have the table name and the properties. Again, this is something that can be updated as needed to something more human readable. And then we have the applied steps. And one of the easiest ways to think about this is this is like a macro that you see kind of broken out. So each one of these line items here is an individual step that is going to be applied to the query, right? So you're connecting to it, you're promoting the headers, you're changing data types, you're renaming columns, so on and so forth. So anytime that the query is refreshed or updated, these applied steps are run through from start to finish, similar to how a macro would be applied. So again, kind of very high level, that's the query editor or the back end. Once we're all set here, we can then load the data and create our data model. And like we had talked about, there's really two main types of tables within Power BI, right? We've got fact or data tables, and then dimension or lookup tables. And fact tables, these contain numerical values or metrics that are used for summarization, right? These are aggregations. So things like sales, orders, transactions, page views, right? That type of transactional level data. You have dimension tables, and these tables generally contain descriptive attributes that are going to be used for filtering or grouping. So examples would include things like products or customers, dates, stores, employees, product colors, things like that. So here's an example of a fact table, right? It contains quantity values along with date and product IDs. And here's some lookup tables. We have a calendar lookup table in green, and then a product lookup table in orange. And when we look at the date, if we look at the fact table, we see that date for January 1st, 1997 is repeating. So it's a foreign key within our fact table. Within our calendar lookup table, the date column is a primary key because there's one instance of each date per record of the table. It's a similar case with the product IDs between these two tables. So the product ID in our fact table is non-unique, right? Product ID can appear multiple times throughout the table, whereas in our product lookup table in orange, that product ID is only going to occur once per line item or per record within that table. So this is kind of one of those core concepts or foundational concepts for data modeling, is the difference between those fact and dimension tables. So from there, it's great that we know that, but what exactly is a data model? Well, this is a data model. And it's a data model because the tables are connected via relationships that are based on those common fields, right? So based on that example, we have something like product key, right? So we have our product lookup, right? Our lookup table up top, and then we have our sales and return tables at the bottom here. And these are our these are our data, our fact tables. So because we have this relationship between these tables, we have connected sales and returns data to our product lookup, and it can then be filtered, right? So that's what I kind of started off talking about, is the whole purpose of creating this data model is to be able to determine or define how filters are passed between a lookup table down to a fact table. And again, this becomes important when you start writing out DAX and all that fun stuff, right? And just to finish out the animation, right, we can get these quantity return, the order quantity and the return quantity values by product name because these tables are connected within the data model. Now, generally speaking, there's two types of schemas that end up being built within Power BI. The first one is a star schema. And again, this is kind of the simplest and most common type of data model that you'll see. And it's characterized by a single fact table that has multiple lookup tables or dimension tables around it. All right, so if you see that sales table in the center here, kind of looks like a star, right? We've got all of those other supporting tables around that one fact table. The other type of schema that's typical is called a snowflake schema. And what this does is it actually includes relationships between sub-dimension tables. So we'll kind of build this out. Let's say you got a product key in sales that's related to a product key in your product lookup table. From there, we would have a subcategory key that's related to our product subcategories lookup table. And then from there, there'd be an additional layer of granularity for product key to a product category key lookup table. So again, you kind of have that chain of relationships that ends up looking like a snowflake. So once we've got our data model all built out, we need to add some fields with DAX. So data analysis expression, it's the formula language that drives Power BI. So with DAX, we can go beyond the traditional capabilities of spreadsheet formulas, and we can add calculated columns, which are used for filtering, and measures for aggregation. So again, two ways that you can kind of use DAX. Calculated columns to kind of stamp these values within a column. So in this example, we're using yes or no for a parent. And you can create measures. So things like total orders, total revenue, quantity ordered, right? Here, we're looking at aggregating some sort of column from a table. Excuse me. So calculated columns, these values are calculated based on information from each row of the table. They have row context. It's a very important kind of concept within Power BI. Calculated columns are used to append static values to each row within the table. This stores them there and it increases model size. Calculated columns are actually recalculated when the data source is refreshed or changes are made to component columns. And like we talked about, these are primarily used for filtering data in reports, like our parent column. Measures, these are calculated based on information from any filters within the report. So measures have filter context. Measures do not create new data themselves, right? So they don't increase file size. Measures are recalculated in response to any filter changes within the report. So if you're adding in a slicer, adding in report visual page level filters, highlighting values and other visuals within a report page, all of that stuff can impact a measure and it would be recalculated. And again, measures are primarily used for aggregating values. One thing to keep in mind here too with measures is that they're actually only visible within a visual. So you would need to add something like a total orders or total revenue measure to a visual in order to understand the output of it. All right, and last kind of piece here. Once we've gone through this whole process, we really want to start, building some sort of a dashboard, right? And these dashboards, they're solid analytics tools to help consolidate data from multiple sources, track key metrics at a glance, and really facilitate that data-driven story. So again, grabbing data from a bunch of different places. You've got product data, revenue data, transactional records, customer CRM data, and you really want to build that into a centralized user-facing dashboard. Again, within Power BI, this is what that report interface looks like. And I want to make sure that we've got time for the actual live demo here. So I'm going to kind of cruise through the slide build here. But again, you've got a lot of these similar UI options, right? This ribbon at the top for insert menu. You've got your report canvas where you're actually going to be dragging and building everything from. You've got a pane switcher here between data and format, bookmark selection, anything that you've got enabled. You can add page, report, and visual level filters. And then at the bottom here, you've got report pages. Each tab is a new blank canvas, very similar to how the Excel sheet tabs work as well. And then some view options to zoom or fit. So very high level, that is Power BI in terms of the kind of the user workflow, everything from connecting to data all the way to visualizing the data with a report. So let's transition into a little bit of a demo and let's pretend that we get a message from our manager And this is from Ethan, and he's welcoming us to the team. Super excited that they're going to be, we're going to be helping develop some new internal reports in Power BI. But before we get started, he'd love our help with a small side project. He'd love if we could connect to and shape Tour de France data. He's attached a couple of files for us and create some visuals that can help answer questions about average speeds, finishers by country, and completion rates. So what we're going to do in this demo is we're going to create queries to connect to these CSV files. We'll do some transformations and shape the data a little bit to prepare for modeling. We'll create a proper data model using one-to-many relationships. And then we'll add visuals to show speed trended by year, finishers by country, and completion rates by year. Awesome. So I am going to get my mouse back here. We'll switch over. Awesome. So from Power BI, right, like I said, we can come up here to the transform menu and we can kind of get into the back end of Power BI. And connecting to data is super straightforward. We're going to go up to new source. We've got some text and CSV data that we're going to use. So we're going to connect to these three tables. We'll start out with the Tour de France tours data. And we'll give this a minute to load here. Every time you connect to a data source, you get this kind of data preview window just so you can kind of understand, the file origin, delimiter. It's a comma delimited file here. And then you're getting a preview based on the first 200 rows. So everything looks good. All right, from there, connect to our calendar table. Again, this is just a very basic calendar table that we're importing. One of the kind of key components with DAX is that in order to use time intelligence functions and to follow kind of data modeling best practices, you need to have a dedicated calendar table that contains all of the dates represented within your fact table. So because we're looking at Tour de France data, which started in the early 1900s, we're going from the early 1900s all the way to 2022. And then our last table is we're going to connect to the finishers data set. And this is going to end up being our fact table. Oops, apologies. All right, so everything looks good here. So first things first, we're going to start off with some different transformations. And excuse me. Our Tour de France tours lookup table looks pretty good. The only thing that we're actually going to do here is we're just going to name this lookup, so we know the purpose of this table. From here, we're going to go to our calendar table. And again, similar case here, call this calendar lookup. And because our finisher data is at a yearly granularity, we've got finisher data by year. What we want to add in is a column that we can use to slice that data by later. So we're going to come up to add column, date, and we're going to add in a new column for start of year. All right, so now we have all of our dates and start of year. And then last, we've got a little bit of work that we need to do with our Tour de France finishers data here. Similarly, first things first, we're going to call this fact. Jordan, so would you look at this? Right. And then if we look at our Tour de France tour data, we have this tour key, right? And this is our primary key as part of this lookup table. In our fact table, we actually don't have any sort of foreign key value here. But we we can do is we can actually determine that based off of the year column. So if we come in and we want to add a new column, and we're going to add a new custom column, we are going to call this tour key. This is going to be based off of the year. So we can reference the year column from within the data set, and we're going to subtract 1902. So our data set starts in 1903. If we subtract 1902, we're going to get 1 every time the first year of the tour, 2 for the second year, and so on and so forth. So this is a very quick way to kind of go through and create a key column. We're going to update the data type, set this to a whole number. And then if I if I right click and select move to beginning, I like having those either primary or foreign keys kind of at the beginning of the table there. So now that we've got the tour key, one of the things that we need to do to help enable or actually to really just make a DAX calculation a little bit easier, is we need to add in the rider. Basically, we want to calculate rider speeds later. So we need to join this with our tours data. And we want to bring in distance. We want to bring in this column. So from the finishers data, come back to the home menu, merge queries. This is where we access those join options. So we're going to join tour key, tours on tour key. The join kind, left outer, Tour de France finishers. This is the left side of the join. And you can see we've matched all of the selections between the tables. Excuse me. And the result here is a table. And what we want to do here is actually expand. And this is really just selecting the column or columns that we want to bring in. So we're going to deselect all of these columns. We just want to bring in the distance. And then I don't really want the original table name as the prefix in the column. So we'll deselect that. All right, so now we have kind of added in this new distance in kilometers for every record within the table. All right, from here, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to select our rider column. And what we want to do here is we actually want to break this out, and we want to isolate the country for each of these riders. So if we come up here to the transform menu, we can select split column by delimiter. And this is going to be a custom delimiter. In opening parentheses, we want to split at the leftmost delimiter, and we want to split it into a separate column. So we'll click OK, see what we get here. So that looks pretty sweet. And what I can do from this column is there's a couple of ways that you could clean this up. You can either say, hey, I want to remove this some sort of value from the column and say, hey, I want to remove the closing parenthesis here. Or what we could do is say, hey, I just want to keep the first 3 letters of this. So if I come up and click extract first characters, this is going to be the first 3 characters that we want to keep. So now we've created a column that has the rider country. We can update the naming conventions here. So rider name, rider country. So that looks pretty good as well. Now, one of the kind of last pieces that we might want to do here is in order to join this with our calendar table, we actually need a date field within this finishers table. So if you look at our year column here, this is just a number value, right? So there's a function within M that you can use. It's basically, you can turn a text into a date. And so if we change this data type to text, and then we're going to add a new column and call this custom column. Excuse me. And let's call this year, just call it date, so we know it's a date format. And the function here is date from text. It's one of the great things about M when you start using it is all of the function names are pretty straightforward. They pretty much tell you exactly what they do. And again, we're going to reference that year column from within the table. And then the next thing that we want to do is just define the format. Okay, so the format is going to equal a 4-digit year. And close out our square bracket, and then parenthesis, no errors. So everything looks pretty good there. Got our year, a couple of small steps. Let's update this data type to a date. And then just because I like to be organized, we're going to move this to the beginning and then slide this by a year. All right, so that wraps up the transformations. From here, let's click close and apply. And let me switch over to legs. There we go. Awesome. So these queries are loading into the data model now. Once this happens, the next piece that we want to do is just go into the data model, and we want to create the relationships. Once we have those relationships created, then we'll be able to build out our DAX measures. So typically this is pretty quick. These files aren't very, very long, or excuse me, very big. So hopefully this happens pretty quickly here.
Thank you. So last but not least, there's resale.
Awesome. Looks like this is just kind of spinning along here for a minute. It's one of the fun things about running a live demo here is you never know how long this is going to take to load the data into the system here. So what's actually happening here, why this is spinning away right now, is when you take all of that data from the Power BI backend in the query editor, what Power BI does internally is it creates something called a query plan. And that query plan it's basically this kind of a mathematical loading algorithm that compresses the data, creates a bunch of mathematical relationships between columns and all that stuff. But what it does is it basically compresses the data as much as possible and then loads it into memory within Power BI. So it does that for a couple of reasons. One, so you don't have to always reach back to some sort of external data source to reference the data, like a SQL server or some on-premise data source. But it also helps speed up performance after it's loaded. So once all this data is loaded, it's accessible and really lives and is stored within Power BI. So it's pretty cool that entire process from connecting and shaping and transforming to then loading it into Power BI here.
I'm pulling something up here to try to see.
Awesome. So we got some errors here with the finishers fact table, but we'll close out of that. go into our model view. And from here, we've got our three tables, our calendar lookup table, our Tour de France finishers fact table, and then our tours lookup table. And one of the things that we like to do is just how we organize our tables is having the lookup tables above the fact tables to really show that our data is flowing downstream. So from here, we're going to make sure that we are linking our date from our calendar table to the year date in our Tour de France finishers fact table. And we'll see that relationship appear here in a moment. Right, and then from our Tour de France, the tours lookup, we're going to connect the tour key. Again, once this finishes working on this relationship here.
Okay, not sure if we received any updates during this regarding Music City Grand Prix. That was the only thing I actually wanted to just read other folks into.
Times like this, I wish Power BI had a built-in kind of like demo mode or something where you could speed up some of these processes. So we'll see what's happening. That is very true. In live sessions, this kind of stuff does happen a lot. All right, so we've got our tour key, and we want to connect to our tour key in the fact table here. And again, once this connection is made, right, this is basically our entire data model. It's really straightforward, right? We've got our one-to-many relationship, so we see how our filters are going to flow from our lookup table down to our finishers table. And then from here, what we can do is we can actually start building out some of our DAX measures. And again, once this is completed working on this process, we'll jump over to the report view and we'll build out a couple of these measures and take a look at this. So I know we're getting very close to time here. So again, we'll kind of go through this pretty quickly. So from the finishers table here, right, we've got all of our columns, all of our attributes. We want to create a new measure. And the first measure that we want to create is based on the number of finishers. Right? We just basically want to be able to say, hey, what are the total number of finishers for all of these Tour de France racers? There's this whole concept of implicit versus explicit measures within Power BI. And generally, you want to create the implicit version of these measures. So that's why we're going through and creating some of these. So number of finishers. And for this, we're going to use the count rows function. And we really just want to count rows from our finishers fact table, because each record of this table is going to represent a unique finisher. We don't have like a rider key or anything else like that we could to use to define that. So counting the rows of the table is kind of our next best option here. After that, we need to create a couple of component calculations to be able to determine our total speed. So first, we're going to do a total time calculation. Time. And for this, we're going to use SumX. And SumX is an iterating aggregation function that basically processes the calculation at every row within the table. And for this same kind of idea, we're going to use the finishers fact table. And we want to look at the total time in hours. Okay, so for total time, just sum the total time in hours, but we're going to look at it for every record of the table. The next component measure that we're going to create is for total distance. Total distance. And again, similar process here. This is going to be a sum x, the finisher's fact table, and this is going to be distance in kilometers, right? So this is the reason why we pulled in that distance column from the lookup table. It's just a little bit easier to aggregate this as part of our total speed calculation. All right, so we've got our component measures. What we can now do is create, really our speed calculation. So for this, call this speed. This is going to be in kilometers per hour. And for this, we're going to use the divide function. And again, because we've defined these measures already, for our numerator, we can use the total distance and then divide that by time. Set an alternate result here. In the case of divide by 0, so something like a hyphen or 0 or whatever makes sense. Right, and then for total speed, let's update this from general to a decimal number. All right, so there was another measure that I had wanted to create, but in the interest of time, let's just kind of stick with what we've got so far. So in terms of adding in visuals, it's super straightforward. Come up here, let's add in a line chart. And we'll move this down a little bit. And on the x-axis, we want to add in the start of year from our calendar table. Again, because we've created that relationship, we're going to get those dates properly displayed. And then we want to add in our speed. Right, so in order to get our speed calculation, we had to create those component calculations. And we'll let Power BI process this here. So pretty quickly here, we have our average rider finisher speed trended over time, right? Now, what if we wanted to be able to see, like Ethan had asked us, to be able to look at finishers, right? So if we, on the y-axis, add in our rider country, and then on the x-axis, the number of finishers. Again, we've quickly got this, bar chart here that we're able to see the number of riders or finishers by country. So we've got 3,122 riders have finished the Tour de France over its history from France, right? And kind of so on and so forth. So there was another measure that I had wanted to build out and show you something else, but again, I think you can, very quickly see how easy it is to connect to data, do some, pretty solid transformations, import that data into Power BI, and then build out a couple of visuals. So that really is going to, I think, wrap up kind of the demo or the fundamentals, foundations of Power BI for the presentation today. See that the Q&A has been very active, and thanks to Chris and John for handling that stuff, but happy to take any time here and answer any sort of other questions or talk about anything as time allows. Yeah, we can absolutely have the data set. This is actually, I amended it a little bit for the presentation just for the sake of time, but the Tour de France data set is available within Maven's data playground. So if you head to the site, you can download the Tour de France data set from the data playground and try out all this stuff for yourself. Thanks so much, Ellie. Appreciate it. Thank you, guys. All right, John, or I see Chris is hanging out in the Q&A, but we got John back on the stage there.
Yeah, Chris has been going wild on comments. Awesome work here. Really great session, Aaron, too. This was fantastic. So we're about to wrap up. Might be able to get another 1 or 2 questions in if anybody has them. But next up today, we'll have the Python session with Chris Brule, which starts in 8 minutes. Let me grab the link for that, and then I'll just drop it in here to make it make that nice and easy for anybody who is thinking about attending. That's right here. And I think I dropped the link earlier, but basically we made one change to a setting, and now at the second link, you'll be able to see all of the sessions, and then also the sessions that you miss, we're going to leave those up at least during Open Campus Week as on-demand sessions. So if anybody wants to watch, whether it's this session, you've seen it, but the other ones, you can go back and watch those. Those are now on demand. You can get those at that link through Livestorm. So, and again, the biggest thing for folks who've been on the other sessions have heard me say it, but for the next 7 days, you can consume all of Aaron's Power BI courses. He's got an amazing Power BI path that you can get in there with. I would start with Power BI Desktop first, and then then it's choose your own adventure a little bit after that. But it is 100% free over the next week. We really hope that people can try to carve some time and take advantage of it, build the skills, earn the credentials. You'll have both the skills and the credentials for life. So thanks a ton. We had a lot of people here. Aaron, you really rocked this one, and we hope to see you guys in the next session in about 7 minutes with Chris Brule. Thanks, everybody.
Exciting stuff, guys. Thank you very much.